So many of us, many of you, since you clicked on this video, are overthinkers. I think especially if you are an introvert or relatively passive, the chances of being an overthinker are even greater because we're just kind of alone with our thoughts. I know for me personally, I kind of re-energize when I'm alone, but it also means that I'm alone with my thoughts. And for years and years, I struggled with this. Overthinking sort of just kind of left me paralyzed sometimes. And so maybe you feel the same way. So what I want to do today is just give 5 ideas, kind of strategies that you can use when you find yourself overthinking. So now I'll preface this with just letting you know about a book I'm reading by John Acuff called Soundtracks, which is about overthinking. I'm about 4 chapters in, and he offers some strategies and some ideas. But one of the things I wanted to share with you before I get to my 5 ideas or strategies you can use is that he talks about overthinking not being a switch that we turn on and off. And actually, he got that idea from somebody else, but rather a dial just to kind of turn down the volume of the overthinking. Obviously, we're going to think all the time, and overthinking is, I think, when it just becomes something that paralyzes us or sets up a roadblock that we put up ourselves that's sort of like imaginary. It's not even really there most of the time. So number 1, the first thing I learned is no one is thinking about you, or very, very few people are thinking about you. I read a book in seminary a long time ago by Dr. Steve Brown called How to Talk So People Will Listen. And it almost sounds kind of contrary to the title of the book, but one of the things he said is, if you're having or want to have conversation with somebody, ask them questions because people love to talk about themselves. I mean, we live in such a narcissistic culture today. People love to hear about themselves. We're always thinking about ourselves. I mean, think about yourself. How often are you thinking about others when they say something embarrassing or silly or that doesn't make sense? Rather, instead, we think about maybe a time that we did that and how we might feel. So this is definitely something to get into our heads. No one is thinking about you. Everybody is concerned about themselves. They're worried about their appearance and what they might say, and are people thinking about them? We just have to look at social media for a minute and see that, people aren't necessarily filming others. It's kind of funny because here I am out in the field filming myself as well. So maybe I'm narcissistic as well, thinking you even want to hear from me. But the truth is, everybody is thinking about themselves and they're not overly concerned about you. Maybe that's a sad thing to say, but it's the truth. So next time you say something that you think sounds weird or maybe isn't going to be received well or is embarrassing or just comes out stupid, know that people aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. Number 2 is really all of these are related, but number 2 is that people have moved on long after whatever you said was said. So you're usually the one that's dwelling there in your mind. And most people have moved on. So let's just say you said something that was just really stupid. It was out of context, had nothing to do with the conversation. Maybe you misunderstood what was going on. And people realize it, and they may kind of make fun of you. They may just kind of roll their eyes. They may ignore you, just give you a blank stare. But chances are within 60 seconds or less, they've moved on. They're not thinking about it anymore. But what do we tend to do as overthinkers in our mind is we are stuck there. We're just building this narrative of how stupid I look and such a failure, and I can't believe I said such an unintelligent thing. And the truth is, people have moved on right away after what was said was said. They're just worried about what they're going to say next, which goes back to number 1. No one's thinking about you, they're thinking about themselves. All right, I moved down a little bit because somebody's getting a new deck on their house or something. It was getting a little bit noisy. There's a giant hair on my microphone. It's definitely not mine. All right, let's move on to number 3. Number 3 is related to number 2 and number 1, and it is don't create these crazy conspiracy theories in your mind about what's actually going on. We can get real creative in our minds and just create these elaborate schemes that people are plotting against us and just some crazy stuff. So I run a nonprofit. I've shared that pretty much every video. And when I first started, I was trying to connect with business leaders, church leaders, mentors, anybody I can to kind of get them on board with what we were doing. And I remember sending out emails constantly and just not getting a response in the time frame that I wanted and expected. And in my mind, I just start to believe, these people don't respect me. They're so inconsiderate. I can't believe they're not responding to these emails. I felt like, well, maybe I'm just a bad leader. I just don't know what I'm doing. I have no business being a leader of an organization. All these different kind of stories popped up in my mind, and I really believed them. So something I did was I purchased and installed some kind of third-party app onto my email that would tell me if an email was opened or clicked on. And it just made things worse because I would see that, no, actually the email wasn't opened. Or even worse than that was the email is opened and they still didn't respond. So it just completely destroyed my ego, and just the stories I built was just like, I'm a failure. People do not want to talk to me. They do not like responding. They don't like what we're doing. Crazy stuff. And all of it was false. And most of the time, within a week, people would respond. And that's not like me. When I get an email, I check it every day, and I usually respond when I first open it, or certainly within 24 hours. And a lot of these guys would respond, a week later, and I didn't really understand that, but I would still get a response. Unfortunately, I still have that on my laptop. I should probably get rid of it, but it is kind of nice to see. But it's so true. I just built these stories up in my mind that were absolute lies. They weren't true at all. So don't let yourself do that. You got to catch yourself doing it and turn the volume down on those stories that are popping up. Number 4 is real simple, and I think I came up with this long before anybody else did, and that is to count to 5 and speak up. So this is more when you are at a meeting or with family and friends, and for whatever reason, maybe there's a friend there that you are intimidated by, or they criticized you at some point, whatever it might be. But this is for the time when you feel like you have something to say, something to contribute, and you don't, because you're too nervous, too afraid of what the response might be. And something that I started doing years ago was counting to 5 and just saying it. So that 5 seconds just gives me enough time to be like, is this really stupid, or is it just kind of what my mind is telling me? And I would just say it. And if it was a dumb thing to say, it's a dumb thing to say, and everybody's moving on anyway. I think it's Mel Robbins, right? So she has something similar. She says count to 3. You can count to 3. You can count to 5. I wouldn't go too much past 5, because then you're just really back in your thoughts again. But when you have something to say it. I mean, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be something valuable, especially if you're in a meeting. There was a number of times, I remember at a job once, I was sitting in on an interview process, and I wasn't really one of the people making the decisions. My boss had wanted me there just for my feedback, and I didn't give it during the conversation we had. I actually gave my feedback after the fact, and she said, well, we already made a decision. We're going to hire this person. And my feedback was we shouldn't hire this person. But I didn't speak up, and as a result, we hired somebody who actually quit less than a year later. There's probably so many times that people have valuable feedback. Maybe, amazing things could happen if we would just speak up. Maybe great decisions would be made in a business, or relationships would be healed, or whatever it might be. But we hold back because of these false narratives in our head. So count to 5 and put it out there. It's not the end of the world. And number 5 is to write down the success stories, the small successes that you have in this whole process of defeating or lowering the volume of the overthinking in your mind. What we do is we focus on the negative, or the negative that we design in our head, right? Stuff that's not even real. We focus on all these failures that are imaginative. We focus on negative thoughts, when really we just need to focus on the small successes we make each day. So let's go back to the conversation at work, right? You have something to say, you do it, you speak up, and you know what? Nobody rolls their eyes. Nobody criticizes you. You're not embarrassed about it. That is a success. Write that down and dwell on it. Write it down and then read it every day. As you build up that list, it just becomes this list of positivity, of encouragement that you can go to every day when you see those successes that you have. They don't need to be these major changes at your job. It's not like you contribute and the business takes this whole new direction that makes them millions of dollars. No, just the fact that you spoke up and weren't embarrassed about it, that's a huge success. Now, going back to what John Acuff says in Soundtracks, the goal isn't to just flip the switch off on our thinking. We're always going to think. We're always going to be thinking about things. At least I do. But the goal is to turn it down so that we're not paralyzed, so that we can move forward, so that we can reach goals, and we can have relationships without developing all these negative thoughts around them. I shared in another video that I spent a lot of time being so negative, and that negativity was false. I created it, and I lived in it, and then I brought it into my home and just kind of infected my home, my wife, with negative thoughts as well. And it really is a dangerous thing. It can really just bring people down. It can bring a whole household down. I think thoughts are so interesting. I mean, I was telling my daughter yesterday, I think about my thoughts. Is that what philosophy is? Maybe I'm a philosopher. But I do. I think about my thoughts and the effect that they have on my life. And I wonder if other people do that sometimes. Let me know in the comments if I'm the only one that does this, or if you think about and analyze your own thoughts. But the thing about thoughts that I've learned is they can be hopeful, they can be encouraging, they can drive us forward, or they can be depressing and cause anxiety and just tear us apart. We can create beautiful stories in our mind, or we can create terrible stories that just keep us from moving forward. I haven't done extensive research on overthinking. I'm reading a few books now, but what I do have is going through it myself and realizing how it was making me a negative person and being so pessimistic about everything. And so I have that experience, and I've started to learn to walk through it. And I do see overthinking really as something that a lot of people suffer from. Probably most people do and just don't admit it. And I kind of think of it as like being an alcoholic or a recovering alcoholic, right? Because it's not something that is ever really going to be defeated. It's just something that we can combat every day when it kind of rears its ugly head. So see if any of these strategies help you. If there are other things that you're doing that you found to be effective, share them in the comments, because I'm sure others will find value in those. And we all kind of need as many strategies as we can get to turning down the volume on our overthinking. Thanks for checking out the video. Next week, I'm going to do a video about how overthinking is keeping you from reaching your goals. So make sure you check that one out. See ya.